The first time I saw Mr. Adams, I knew my world was about to tilt. He walked into the room like he owned it, and technically, he did. As the new guy at Henderson and Company, I should have focused on the spreadsheets, but there was something about him that I couldn't ignore. Charismatic? Sure, but that's an understatement. He had this aura. You know, I caught myself stealing glances, more than I should have. Things escalated quickly. I found myself on the receiving end of Mr. Adams' attention. It started with, "Great job on the report, Sarah," and snowballed into, "You look nice today." Flattering, yes, but I brushed it off as him being nice. That was until the company party. Picture this. A dimly lit room, music blending with chatter, and there I was, clutching my drink like a lifeline. Then Mr. Adams was beside me, his voice a soft contrast to the surrounding cacophony. We talked, laughed, and for a moment, I forgot I was just Sarah from accounting. But when his hand brushed mine, it sent a jolt through me. I should have walked away then. I know that now, but I didn't. Word travels fast in an office. By Monday, whispers followed me like a shadow. I could feel the eyes on me, the unspoken questions. I shrugged it off, buried myself in numbers and deadlines. But there was this nagging feeling in my gut, a warning I chose to ignore. Then there was John, my husband. He sensed something was off the moment I walked through our door. "You seem different," he said one evening, his eyes searching mine. I laughed it off, told him work was just hectic. But the truth was, I was changing, and I was scared he could see it. The tipping point was the business trip. Mr. Adams needed someone from accounting, and surprise, surprise, he chose me. "It's a great opportunity, Sarah," he said, his smile not reaching his eyes. I knew it was a bad idea, but the thrill, the sheer recklessness of it was intoxicating. I packed my bag, telling John it was just work. But as I zipped it shut, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. I hardly recognized the woman staring back. She was excited, yes, but there was a trace of something else. Fear? Guilt? Maybe both. As I sat in the cab to the airport, my phone buzzed. "John, good luck, love," his text read. It felt like a punch in the gut. Here I was, diving headfirst into something I knew was wrong. And there he was, being the supportive husband he always was. Sitting in that airport lounge, waiting to board the plane with Mr. Adams, I realized I was at a crossroads. One path led back to my comfortable, predictable life with John. The other? A leap into the unknown, driven by a dangerous mix of attraction and curiosity. Little did I know, my choice would set off a chain of events that would change everything. But that's a story for another day. Who's Mr. Adams? That was the question that shattered the silence of our kitchen. John stood there, my phone in his hand, his face a mix of confusion and hurt. I had forgotten to delete those texts, the ones where Mr. Adams and I crossed a line that should have stayed uncrossed. I tried to play it off, saying Mr. Adams was just being friendly, but John wasn't buying it. He had always been sharp, seeing through my half-hearted lies. The air was thick with unspoken accusations, and I felt trapped. I lied, said it was nothing, but the distance between us grew wider with every word. The affair with Mr. Adams started soon after, like a wildfire. We met in secret, in places where no one would recognize us. It was reckless, I know, but it was also thrilling in a way my life with John hadn't been for years. Mr. Adams made me feel desired, alive, and I was too caught up to see the consequences. But secrets have a way of coming out. One evening, after a risky rendezvous, a colleague saw us. I didn't know at the time, but they went straight to John. The thought of someone knowing, it panicked me. I should have stopped, but I didn't. John confronted me again, this time with more than just suspicions. He was broken. I could see it in his eyes. The man who had been my rock, my constant, was crumbling because of me. So, I did the only thing I thought I could do. I admitted it. The affair, the lies, all of it. And then I asked for a separation. John was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was so low, I had to strain to hear it. "Why, Sarah? Why him?" I didn't have an answer, or at least not one that would make any difference. I muttered something about being unhappy, but the truth was, I didn't fully understand it myself. That night, I packed a bag and left. I left the home we had built together, the life we had shared. I left behind a man who had done nothing but love me, and for what? A fleeting affair that I knew deep down wouldn't last. As I drove to the small apartment I had rented, the gravity of what I had done began to sink in. My marriage was over, my reputation at work was on the line, and for the first time in a long time, I was truly alone. The excitement I had felt with Mr. Adams was gone, replaced by a hollow emptiness. I lay in bed that night, in a room that felt as unfamiliar as the choices I had made. The silence was deafening, a stark contrast to the life I had just walked away from. And as I closed my eyes, I wondered if the thrill was worth the price I was now paying. The day I moved out of the house I shared with John felt like stepping into an alternate reality. There I was, in a tiny apartment that echoed with emptiness, surrounded by boxes that held fragments of a life I had just turned upside down. The walls were bare, the air stale, a stark contrast to the warmth and love of the home I'd left behind. Mr. Adams, he was there, promising me the world as I unpacked. "I'll leave my wife," he said, his words weaving a future I wanted to believe in. In that small, dimly lit apartment, his promises felt like a lifeline. So, I clung to them, diving deeper into an affair that was already costing me everything. But secrets, they have a way of spreading like wildfire. Soon enough, whispers turned into rumors at work. I'd walk into the office, and the chatter would stop, eyes following me as I passed. Colleagues I once considered friends now looked at me with a mix of pity and disdain. My professional reputation, built over years of hard work, was unraveling faster than I could salvage it. In the midst of this turmoil, John filed for divorce. Infidelity that was the reason stated in the cold, legal documents that landed on my doorstep. Seeing it in writing, stark and undeniable, was a gut punch. It made everything real in a way it hadn't been before. John, the man I had shared my life with, was now a stranger, reduced to signatures on divorce papers. The fallout didn't end there. Friends who I had laughed with, cried with, shared secrets with, began to distance themselves. Calls went unanswered, invitations stopped coming. Even my family, who had always been my support system, expressed their disappointment in hushed tones and heavy sighs. The look in my mother's eyes, one of heartbreak and confusion, hurt more than any words could. In the quiet of my apartment, I'd sit and let the reality wash over me. The affair, which had started as a thrilling escape, had turned my world into a lonely island. I had traded a life filled with love and companionship for stolen moments that left me feeling emptier with each passing day. As I lay in bed at night, the silence of the apartment was a stark reminder of the choices I had made. Gone were the familiar sounds of John's steady breathing, the comforting creaks of a house that had been a home. Instead, there was just the hum of the city outside, indifferent to the turmoil inside me. Looking back, I wish I could say I saw it all coming, but the truth is, I was blinded by a fantasy, ignoring the reality that was crumbling around me. The price of my choices was becoming painfully clear, and yet, there was no turning back. I had set things in motion that I couldn't undo, and now, I had to live with the consequences. There's nothing quite like being confronted by your lover's wife in the middle of a crowded cafe. That's how Mrs. Adams chose to drop the bombshell. She stormed in, her eyes blazing with a fury that made everyone else fade into the background. "Sarah," she hissed, and the room seemed to hold its breath. The confrontation was brutal, her words like daggers, sharp and unrelenting. I sat there, frozen, as she laid bare the affair to a room full of strangers. The aftermath of that public spectacle was immediate. Any semblance of a support network I had left crumbled away. Friends who had been teetering on the edge of staying in my life now vanished. My phone became a silent testament to my isolation. Even the sympathetic looks from a few colleagues at work dried up. I was an outcast, alone in a mess of my own making. Then came the final blow in my personal life, the divorce. John won, and honestly, I didn't put up much of a fight. How could I? He had the moral high ground, and everyone knew it. The sympathy he received from our mutual acquaintances was well-deserved, but it stung. Each expression of support for him felt like an indictment against me. I was the villain in our story, and the public verdict was unanimous. Work became a minefield. Whispers followed me down hallways, and colleagues who once greeted me with smiles now offered nothing but cold shoulders. My assignments started to dwindle, handed off to others under the guise of redistributing the workload. It was discrimination, plain and simple, but I was in no position to complain. My professional reputation was in tatters, collateral damage in the fallout of my personal life. Amidst all this, Mr. Adams started to pull away. Our secret meetings became less frequent, his messages shorter and more distant. I could see the calculation in his eyes, weighing the risk I now posed to his reputation. The man who had whispered sweet promises was retreating, leaving me to face the consequences alone. I remember sitting in my apartment one evening, the silence oppressive. It dawned on me that I was not just fighting a losing battle, I was fighting it alone. The affair, once a thrilling escape, had become my prison. I was paying for it, not just with my marriage and friendships, but with my dignity and self-worth. I'd lie awake at night, replaying Mrs. Adams' accusations in my head, feeling the weight of judgment from my colleagues and the growing distance from Mr. Adams. The realization hit hard. I was not the victim of circumstance. I was the architect of my downfall, and the loneliness I felt was the foundation I had laid, brick by brick. In those moments of clarity, regret was a constant companion. I had traded everything for a fleeting fantasy, and now I was reaping the whirlwind. The path I had chosen was littered with the debris of broken relationships and lost respect. And as Mr. Adams' presence in my life faded to a mere shadow, the magnitude of my folly became painfully clear. The moment I saw the envelope on my desk, marked "Formal Warning," my heart sank. It wasn't unexpected, but it stung all the same. The words, "unprofessional conduct," leapt out at me, a stark reminder of how far I'd fallen. It was a slap in the face, a wake-up call that I was no longer just Sarah from accounting, but Sarah, the center of office scandal. As if on cue, Mr. Adams chose that moment to drop his bombshell. "I'm staying with my wife," he said, his voice devoid of the warmth it once held. Those words hit me like a ton of bricks. I had gambled everything on a future with him, and now I was left with nothing. The floor seemed to fall away beneath me, and I felt adrift, lost in a sea of my own making. In my desperation, I tried to reconcile with him. I told myself it was love, but deep down, I knew it was fear. Fear of being alone, of facing the consequences without the safety net he had provided. But he was resolute, cold even. "It's over, Sarah," he said, and with those 3 words, the last thread of hope I was clinging to snapped. Work became a struggle. My mind was constantly elsewhere, replaying the mess of my life over and over. Numbers and reports, once my refuge, now felt like insurmountable mountains. I missed deadlines, made errors, and with each mistake, I felt my professional credibility slipping away. I was spiraling, and I couldn't find a way to stop. The rumors, meanwhile, were relentless. They spread through the office like wildfire, each retelling more exaggerated than the last. I could feel the eyes on me, the whispers behind closed doors. I had become a pariah, shunned and isolated. Colleagues I once considered friends now avoided me, and I couldn't blame them. I had become a cautionary tale, a subject of office gossip. Lunch hours were the worst. The break room, once a place of laughter and shared stories, now felt like enemy territory. I'd sit alone at a table, the empty chairs around me a stark reminder of the solitude I had brought upon myself. I'd eat quickly, avoiding eye contact, the murmur of conversations around me a constant reminder of what I had lost. I'd go home to my empty apartment, the silence a stark contrast to the cacophony of the office. There, in the quiet, I couldn't escape the reality of my situation. The affair, which had once seemed like a thrilling adventure, had left me broken, both personally and professionally. Night after night, I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, the events of the past months replaying in my mind. The warnings, the rejection, the isolation. It was a never-ending cycle of regret and self-reproach. I had made a series of choices, each one leading me further down a path of self-destruction. And now, as I lay there in the dark, I was forced to confront the truth. I was the architect of my own downfall. Sitting alone in my dimly lit apartment, it finally hit me. I had no one left. The silence was deafening, a stark reminder of the isolation I'd brought upon myself. My phone, once buzzing with messages from friends and loved ones, now lay silent, a testament to the bridges I'd burned. Financially, things were spiraling out of control. The legal fees from the divorce were piling up, each invoice a harsh reminder of the cost of my mistakes. I'd look at my dwindling bank account and feel a knot of panic in my stomach. Budgeting became my new reality, with every penny spent sending a wave of anxiety through me. In desperation, I reached out to old friends, hoping to rekindle lost connections. But the reception was cold, messages left unanswered, invitations declined. It was clear they had moved on, unwilling to associate with the person I had become. Each rejection was a blow, a painful confirmation of my newfound status as an outcast. Then came the news that felt like a punch to the gut. John was getting remarried. Hearing about his new life, so full of happiness and promise, was like looking through a window into a world I was no longer a part of. It underscored my loneliness, highlighting the stark contrast between our paths. He had found a way to move on, to rebuild, while I was stuck in the ruins of the life I had destroyed. At work, my situation grew increasingly precarious. My performance had been slipping for months, but now it was under official review. Meetings with HR became a regular occurrence, each one more disheartening than the last. I was walking on thin ice, my every move scrutinized. The job I had once been so proud of was now hanging by a thread, my career teetering on the edge of collapse. I would sit at my desk, surrounded by the buzz of office life, feeling more alone than ever. My colleagues' laughter sounded distant, their conversations like a foreign language. I was there, but not really, a ghost haunting my own life. The work, once a source of pride and accomplishment, had become a Sisyphean task, each day a struggle to maintain a facade of normalcy. At night, I'd trudge back to my apartment, each step heavy with the weight of my reality. I'd eat dinner in front of the TV, trying to drown out the silence with mindless shows. But the distraction was fleeting. As soon as the screen went dark, the truth of my situation would come crashing back, leaving me to face the long, lonely hours until dawn. In those moments of solitude, I'd reflect on everything I'd lost: my marriage, my friends, my professional integrity. I was a ship adrift, with no port in sight. The choices I had made seemed like a distant dream, a series of misguided steps that had led me to this point of no return. I'd lie awake, the darkness a canvas for my regrets. The faces of those I'd hurt would flash before my eyes, their disappointment a heavy cloak around my shoulders. I was trapped in a cycle of remorse and self-pity, unable to find a way out of the labyrinth I had created. The day Mr. Adams cut off all contact was the day the last thread holding me to my old life snapped. His final message was brief, a cold end to what had once been a burning flame. He blocked my number, my emails, even on social media. It was like he vanished, taking the last piece of the world I knew with him. That's when the walls of my small apartment began to close in on me. The silence became a constant companion, only broken by the ticking of the clock, each second a reminder of my isolation. My thoughts turned into a whirlpool, dragging me down into darker depths. Sleep became elusive, and when it did come, it was filled with restless dreams. I'd wake up feeling more tired than before, a hollow shell going through the motions of a life that had lost its meaning. An eviction notice soon followed. I remember staring at the paper, the words, "failure to pay rent," blurring before my eyes. It was a wake-up call, but I was too far gone to answer it. The reality of being homeless loomed over me, but I couldn't muster the energy to do anything about it. My finances, already strained from the divorce, were in shambles. I was sinking, and I couldn't find a way to swim back to the surface. In my desperation, I turned to the one thing that promised a temporary escape: alcohol. It started with a glass of wine in the evening, but soon, it wasn't enough. The wine turned into vodka, and one glass turned into several. It numbed the pain, blurred the sharp edges of my reality. But the relief was fleeting. The morning would bring back the pain, the guilt, the loneliness. Only now, It was compounded by a throbbing headache and a queasy stomach. At work, my situation reached a breaking point. My performance, already on shaky ground, deteriorated further. I was making mistakes, missing deadlines, arriving late, or sometimes not at all. My colleagues, who had once been sympathetic, were now openly hostile. I overheard whispers in the break room, caught glimpses of emails. They were petitioning to have me removed from the company. I was a liability, a bad influence, they said. I couldn't blame them, but it stung, nonetheless. I remember sitting in my cubicle, the sounds of the office around me fading into a distant hum. I felt detached, like I was watching my life fall apart from the outside. The job I had worked so hard for, the career I had built over years, was slipping through my fingers like sand. And the worst part was, I didn't know how to stop it. Each day was a battle, a struggle to find a reason to get out of bed, to face the world. I was caught in a vicious cycle of self-loathing and despair, unable to break free. The woman I had been, confident, successful, loved, felt like a stranger. In her place was someone I barely recognized, someone consumed by regret and haunted by the ghosts of her past. As I lay in bed each night, the room spinning around me, I couldn't help but wonder how everything had gone so wrong. The choices I had made seemed like a distant memory, a series of wrong turns that had led me to this moment of utter desolation. And as the darkness enveloped me, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of a long, downward spiral. Hey everyone, I hope you're enjoying the video so far. If you do, please take a moment to hit that like button. It really helps me out and lets me know you appreciate the content. Also, if you haven't already, consider subscribing to the channel. Subscribing is a great way to stay updated with all the latest videos and to be part of our growing community. It's quick, it's free, and it ensures you won't miss out on any upcoming content. So go ahead, smash that like button and hit subscribe. Your support means a lot and keeps this channel going. Thanks for watching. The night I got into that altercation, it was like watching a train wreck in slow motion. There I was, a few drinks too many in my system, emotions raw and exposed. The bar was crowded, the air thick with the tension of my frayed nerves. Words were exchanged, harsh, biting words, with some woman whose face I can't even recall. It escalated quickly, and before I knew it, the sound of sirens filled the air, flashing lights painting the walls in blues and reds. The police arrived, their stern faces a stark reminder of how far I had fallen. The next day, the hangover was the least of my worries. My boss called me into his office, his expression grim. The incident had made its rounds, another scandal to add to my growing list. This was the final straw. I was fired, effective immediately. As I cleared out my desk, I felt the weight of every disappointed glance, every whispered word. I walked out of the office, a place I once considered a second home, for the last time. My career in tatters. Jobless and with bills piling up, desperation took hold. I started selling whatever I could, furniture, jewelry, even some of my clothes. Each item sold felt like a piece of me leaving, memories attached to them dissipating into the hands of strangers. But the money was never enough. It was merely a drop in the ocean of debt I had accumulated. The job hunt was demoralizing. My reputation had preceded me, a shadow I couldn't escape. Interviews were few and far between, and even when I did manage to land one, the air would shift as soon as my name was recognized. I was no longer Sarah, the competent accountant. I was Sarah, the woman embroiled in scandal. My professional achievements were overshadowed by my personal failures, and it seemed like the industry had turned its back on me. As the stress mounted, so did its toll on my health. I was eating poorly, barely sleeping, and the alcohol, my crutch, only worsened things. My reflection in the mirror showed a woman I hardly recognized. Dark circles under my eyes, skin pale and sallow, a far cry from the vibrant person I once was. My body was rebelling against the constant state of anxiety and neglect, a physical manifestation of my inner turmoil. I remember one particularly rough night, sitting on the floor of my now sparsely furnished apartment. The walls felt like they were closing in. Each item sold another square foot of space I couldn't fill. The silence was oppressive, a stark contrast to the chaotic noise in my head. I felt trapped in a cycle of despair, each day blurring into the next, a monotonous march of regret and self-loathing. In those moments, the gravity of my situation would hit me full force. I had lost everything: my marriage, my job, my friends, and now, my health. The choices I had made, one after another, had led me to this point. I was a shadow of my former self, living in the aftermath of decisions that had seemed so right at the time, but had proven to be my undoing. It didn't take long for the news of my downfall to spread, not just within the professional circles, but also in the social ones. I became the subject of hushed conversations and not-so-subtle stares. My story, once a tale of success, had turned into a cautionary one, a warning of what not to become. It was humiliating, knowing that I was now an example of failure, a lesson in poor choices and lost morals. The day I was evicted from my apartment was one of the lowest points in my life. I remember standing in front of the building, my meager possessions in a suitcase, with nowhere to go. The landlord was apologetic but firm. I hadn't paid rent in months. I wandered the streets aimlessly until I found a shelter that would take me in. The nights I spent there were a blur of despair and hopelessness, surrounded by others who, like me, had hit rock bottom. In a moment of desperation, I reached out to John. I don't know what I was hoping for: forgiveness, maybe, or at least some semblance of understanding. But he wanted nothing to do with me. His refusal to see me was a clear message. I was a part of his past, a chapter he had firmly closed. It hurt, but I couldn't blame him. I had made my bed, and now I had to lie in it. Word of my situation had even reached my hometown. People who had known me as a bright, promising young woman were now shaking their heads in disappointment. My parents, already heartbroken by my choices, now had to face the gossip and pity of our neighbors and friends. It was one thing to lose the respect of acquaintances, but knowing I had brought shame to my family was a different kind of pain. My health, which had been on a steady decline, finally gave in. I was hospitalized after collapsing on the street, a combination of stress, poor nutrition, and alcohol. Lying in that hospital bed, I realized just how alone I was. There were no visitors, no flowers, no get-well cards. Just the sterile white walls and the beeping of machines. When I was discharged, the sense of loneliness was overwhelming. I had nowhere to go, no one to turn to. The world outside seemed vast and uncaring. I wandered the streets, a ghost of my former self, lost in a maze of regret and self-pity. It was during these aimless wanderings that the full extent of my mistakes finally hit me. I had been so caught up in what I thought I wanted, so blinded by ambition and desire, that I hadn't seen the destruction I was leaving in my wake. My choices had not only ruined my life but had hurt those around me, leaving a trail of pain and betrayal. I found myself sitting on a park bench one day, watching the world go by. Families laughed, couples held hands, and life moved on around me. But I was stuck, trapped in a life I no longer recognized, with no clear path forward. The irony of it all was not lost on me. I had once had everything I thought I wanted, only to end up with nothing. As I sat there, lost in thought, I couldn't help but wonder where it all went wrong. How had I gone from a successful, loved woman to this? A shadow, a cautionary tale, a stranger even to myself? The answers were as elusive as the wind, and as I looked out at the world, I knew one thing for sure. I was at a crossroads. I couldn't believe I was asking this of him. We were sitting in our cozy living room, the fireplace casting a warm glow. "Would you ever consider sharing me?" I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. His eyes widened in surprise, but he didn't immediately dismiss it. He looked thoughtful, almost curious. And there it was, the beginning of the end, or the start of something new. Who knew? My stomach was doing somersaults, and I couldn't tell if it was excitement or pure, unadulterated terror. We spent the next few days discussing the idea. Each conversation felt like a high-stakes negotiation. "Are you sure this is what you want?" he'd ask, brows furrowed, looking at me like I was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. I kept explaining that it was about excitement, about shaking things up. Honestly, I wasn't even sure myself, but his willingness to consider it surprised me. Was it possible he was just as curious, just as bored? I reached out to a close friend, Jessica, who had experience in open relationships. Over coffee at our favorite cafe, she spilled the beans on her adventures. It's freeing, she said, her eyes sparkling. But it can also get messy. Really messy. She warned me about potential pitfalls, but also spoke of the excitement and newness it brought to her own marriage. Her stories fueled my curiosity and my resolve. If Jessica could do it, why couldn't I? My husband and I set boundaries and rules. We agreed on complete honesty and communication. It's only about adding excitement, not replacing what we have, I assured him, though I wasn't entirely sure I believed it myself. The mix of excitement and trepidation was intoxicating. This could either be the best decision of our lives or an unmitigated disaster. No pressure. The first candidate was found through a dating app. His name was Mark, a charming, well-spoken man who seemed perfect. We chatted online for a week, sharing interests and fantasies. It was thrilling in a way I hadn't felt in years. I told my husband everything, and he seemed supportive, albeit with a hint of jealousy lurking beneath the surface. It was a strange cocktail of emotions, but we were in it together, or so I hoped. The first meeting was nerve-wracking. We chose a neutral location, a quiet, upscale bar. My husband and I went together, but he sat a few tables away, nursing a drink and observing as Mark and I exchanged pleasantries. The tension in the air was palpable. I could feel my husband's eyes on us, a mix of curiosity and something darker. Mark and I hit it off immediately. He was charming and attentive, making me feel special in a way I hadn't in years. As the evening wore on, I found myself laughing, flirting, and genuinely enjoying his company. When the night ended, my husband and I had a long talk. He admitted to feeling jealous, but also aroused by the experience. It was a bizarre, confusing mix of emotions for both of us. We decided to move forward cautiously, dipping our toes further into this uncharted territory. Little did I know, this was just the beginning. The excitement was electric, but so was the underlying current of potential disaster. And honestly, I wasn't sure which I was more excited about. The first intimate encounter with Mark was planned meticulously. A hotel room, separate from our home life, seemed like the safest way to dip my toes into this uncharted territory. I remember standing outside the door, keycard in hand, heart pounding like I was about to commit a crime. In a way, I was breaking all the unspoken rules of our marriage. Excitement mixed with guilt churned in my stomach, but Mark's charm and confidence were a steadying force. We shared a passionate night, and I felt a rush of emotions that I hadn't felt in years. It was exhilarating, confusing, and utterly addictive. Returning home, I faced my husband. He was waiting, his eyes scanning me for clues. "How was it?" he asked, trying to sound casual but failing miserably. He wanted to know every detail, and I obliged, sparing nothing. His reactions were a mix of arousal and jealousy, which only complicated my feelings. That night, our own intimacy was intense, driven by the taboo experience. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were playing with fire. Mark and I continued to meet regularly, each encounter becoming more intense. We explored each other's fantasies, pushing boundaries I never thought I'd cross. The secrecy and thrill made it all the more exhilarating. It was a double life, one filled with passion and danger, and I was living for it. But cracks began to show. My husband started exhibiting signs of discomfort. He became more distant and irritable, despite his initial agreement. Our conversations about the arrangement grew more strained, and I began to worry about the impact on our marriage. Was this really just about excitement, or was it tearing us apart? One night, Mark introduced me to his circle of friends. They were a lively, adventurous group, and I found myself drawn to their carefree lifestyle. It was intoxicating to be part of their world. One evening, we attended a party where the boundaries of our arrangement were tested further. The music was loud, the drinks flowed freely, and inhibitions were left at the door. At the party, I met Lisa, a stunning woman who exuded confidence. She took an immediate interest in me, her eyes twinkling with mischief. Mark encouraged the interaction, and before I knew it, Lisa and I were sharing an intimate moment. It was a new experience that added another layer of complexity to my feelings. It was thrilling and confusing, and I could feel the ground shifting beneath my feet. Back home, my husband confronted me about the growing frequency and intensity of my encounters with Mark. He expressed his discomfort and jealousy, questioning if this was still just about excitement. The tension between us reached a boiling point. His eyes were full of hurt, and I felt a pang of guilt that was hard to ignore. "Is this what you really want?" he asked, his voice trembling with emotion. I didn't have an answer. The thrill was real, but so was the cost. I was caught in a web of my own making, torn between the excitement of my affair with Mark and the unraveling of my marriage. The line between excitement and destruction had become dangerously thin, and I was teetering on the edge. Our arguments became more frequent. My husband and I were no longer on the same page. Every conversation turned into a battlefield. "You're prioritizing Mark over us," he accused, his voice tinged with hurt and anger. I felt torn between the excitement of my relationship with Mark and my commitment to my husband. Was it worth it? This thrill that was slowly ripping apart the fabric of our life together? Despite the tension, I continued seeing Mark. Our connection deepened, and one night, he dropped the bombshell. "I think I'm falling for you," he said, his eyes earnest and intense. Flattering, sure, but confusing as hell. Did I want this? My husband noticed the change in my demeanor, the lingering smiles, the distracted looks. His suspicion grew, and so did the distance between us. One evening, I came home to find my husband had packed a bag. "I need space to think," he said, avoiding my eyes. The reality of the situation hit me like a freight train. I might be losing him and our marriage. Panic set in, and the house felt unbearably empty without him. Desperate for guidance, I reached out to Jessica again. Over another coffee, I poured out my heart. She warned me that emotions could complicate any open relationship. "You need to address your feelings honestly with him," she advised. Her words resonated, cutting through the fog of my confusion. It was time to face the music. Mark sensed my turmoil and offered his support. One evening, he confessed his growing attachment to me, suggesting a future together. It was tempting, but deep down, I knew it wasn't what I truly wanted. This experiment had spiraled out of control, and I was on the verge of losing everything that mattered. I decided to end things with Mark. Our final meeting was emotional. He understood my decision, but was clearly hurt. I felt a mix of relief and sadness, knowing I had to focus on repairing my marriage. As I walked away from him, I realized just how much I had risked. Returning home, I found my husband waiting. We had a long, heartfelt conversation. I apologized for letting things go too far, for prioritizing the excitement over our relationship. He admitted his own mistakes and vulnerabilities. It was a raw, honest moment between us. We agreed to start anew, setting firmer boundaries. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a while, I felt hopeful. The mystery of what our future held was daunting, but I was ready to face it, one step at a time, with my husband by my side. Rebuilding trust was like trying to piece together a shattered vase with a blindfold on. We were a mess, and couples therapy felt like our last lifeline. Sitting on that therapist's couch, baring our souls, was painful but necessary. The therapist, let's call her Dr. Fix-It, helped us navigate the emotional minefield and set some realistic expectations. She had this annoying way of getting to the heart of the matter, making us confront the stuff we'd been avoiding for far too long. Rediscovering shared interests became our new mission. Weekend hikes, which we used to love, were back on the agenda. There's something about trudging through the woods that clears the mind. We started cooking together again, a dance of chopping and stirring that reminded us of the early days. Intimate evenings with no distractions brought us back to each other, slowly but surely. It was a reminder of why we fell in love in the first place. I cut off all contact with Mark and his friends. It felt like ripping off a band-aid, necessary but painful. I deleted his number, unfollowed him on social media, and avoided places where we might run into each other. My husband appreciated the effort, though I could see it would take time for him to fully trust that I was committed. Trust isn't built overnight, after all. Social challenges were another hurdle. Friends and family had noticed the strain in our marriage, and their well-meaning questions were like salt in the wound. We decided to keep the details private, focusing on our own journey. It wasn't anyone else's business, and the last thing we needed was unsolicited advice. A major breakthrough came when we revisited the reasons behind our initial decision to open up our marriage. Sitting at our kitchen table, we realized our communication had been seriously lacking. We'd been so busy avoiding the tough conversations that we'd lost sight of each other. Admitting our fears and desires, openly and honestly, brought us closer. It was like a weight had been lifted. We planned a romantic getaway, a chance to escape the daily grind and focus on each other. It was a turning point, filled with laughter, deep conversations, and renewed intimacy. We rediscovered the joy of being together, away from the chaos and expectations of everyday life. It felt like a fresh start, a chance to rewrite our story. Returning home, we continued to prioritize our relationship. Date nights became a regular thing. Spontaneous gestures of affection were the norm, and constant communication was our new mantra. It wasn't always easy. Old wounds take time to heal, but we were stronger together. The cracks were still there, but they were becoming less noticeable as we filled them with love and understanding. Our journey was far from over, but for the first time in a long time, we were facing it together, and that made all the difference. Just when I thought we were in the clear, the past came knocking. Months later, I received a message from Mark. "Hey, just checking in. How are you?" Short, simple, but it packed a punch. It stirred up old feelings, excitement, guilt, curiosity, but I knew better than to respond. I showed the message to my husband, and we discussed it openly. No secrets, no hidden agendas. It was awkward but necessary. Trust was still a fragile thing, and I wasn't about to jeopardize it again. Despite my resolve, the temptation lingered like an itch I couldn't scratch. I missed the excitement and freedom of my time with Mark. It was like a siren's call, beckoning me back to a world of thrill and danger. Staying focused on my marriage felt like walking a tightrope. My husband sensed my struggle and offered his support, reaffirming his commitment. His understanding made it both easier and harder. How could I still crave that forbidden fruit when I had everything I needed right here? Then came the work event. Enter David, charming, attentive, and all too reminiscent of Mark. I felt an instant attraction. Oh great, here we go again, I thought, rolling my eyes at the universe's twisted sense of humor. The lessons from my past were fresh in my mind, but the temptation was real. I had to be careful. David's interest became more apparent as he invited me for drinks after work. I declined, aware of the slippery slope. Instead, I went home and confided in my husband about the situation. He appreciated my honesty, and we discussed how to handle it. It felt good to be on the same team, facing the challenge together. But David was persistent, and his advances grew bolder. I felt increasingly uncomfortable, like a fly caught in a spider's web. Enough was enough. I decided to confront him directly, making it clear that I was committed to my marriage and not interested in anything more than a professional relationship. It was awkward. David's ego took a hit, but it was necessary. The confrontation with David wasn't fun, but it did the trick. He respected my boundaries, and things returned to normal at work. My husband and I felt a renewed sense of trust and partnership, having navigated another potential threat. It was another test, and we had passed with flying colors. We celebrated our resilience with a weekend getaway, reinforcing our bond. The experience with David was a stark reminder that temptations would always exist, but our commitment to each other was stronger. We spent the weekend reconnecting, laughing, and talking about our future. It was a reminder of how far we'd come and how much we had to look forward to. The past had its claws in me, but I was determined to keep moving forward. Temptation might come knocking again, but this time, I was ready. We were ready. Our marriage had weathered the storm, and we were stronger for it. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and that was enough. Moving to a new city felt like stepping off a cliff, exhilarating and terrifying all at once. We needed a fresh start, away from old memories and influences that still clung like shadows. The process of finding a new home and settling in was thrilling. Each new discovery, every box unpacked, brought us closer. Our new house had a charming, lived-in feel that screamed, second chances. Our new neighborhood was vibrant and full of possibilities. There were quirky cafes, a bustling farmer's market, and friendly neighbors who actually smiled. We made an effort to build a supportive community around us, making new friends and creating a positive environment. It was refreshing to be surrounded by people who didn't know our past, who only saw the happy couple we were striving to become. I started a new job, which came with its own set of challenges and opportunities. It was a chance to reinvent myself, to focus on personal growth. My husband was supportive, cheering me on from the sidelines. Our relationship continued to strengthen, the wounds from the past slowly healing. Each day felt like a step forward, a move towards something better. We joined a local couples group, participating in activities and workshops that focused on relationship building. It was surprisingly fun, and we learned a lot about ourselves and each other. The group provided us with tools to maintain our connection, to keep the spark alive. It was like having a support network for our marriage, and we embraced it wholeheartedly. Our anniversary rolled around, and we decided to celebrate with a special trip. We revisited places that held significant memories for us, places that had seen us at our best and worst. It was a reaffirmation of our love and commitment, a reminder of how far we'd come. The trip was filled with laughter, deep conversations, and moments of pure joy. It felt like we were rediscovering each other all over again. Our relationship flourished as we embraced new experiences together. We took up hobbies, traveled to new destinations, and created new traditions. The past was behind us, and we were focused on building a bright future. It was liberating to let go of the old baggage and just live in the moment. One evening, we hosted a dinner party for our new friends. The house was filled with the sound of laughter, clinking glasses, and good company. Looking around, I realized how much we had grown and how strong our bond had become. We were surrounded by people who genuinely cared about us, and it was a joyful occasion. Life wasn't perfect, but it was pretty darn close. We had faced our demons, battled through the storms, and come out stronger on the other side. Moving to a new city had been the right decision, a fresh start that we desperately needed. Our journey was far from over, but for the first time in a long time, I felt optimistic about the future. We were building something beautiful together, one day at a time. Out of the blue, I received another message from Mark. "Hey, I'm in town. Would love to catch up." Just like that, the old temptation resurfaced, clawing at the peace we'd worked so hard to build. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. Here we go again, I thought, rolling my eyes at the universe's twisted sense of humor. But this time was different. I wasn't the same person, and our marriage wasn't the same fragile thing it once was. I showed the message to my husband, and we discussed it calmly. No secrets, no drama, just open communication. We decided to meet Mark together, seeking closure. The encounter was awkward but necessary. We chose a neutral coffee shop, one of those places with overpriced lattes and hipster baristas. Mark looked the same, charming, confident, and completely unaware of the chaos he'd left in his wake. He apologized for his part in the turmoil and wished us well. It was a moment of healing and finality, the last piece of the puzzle clicking into place. After the meeting, my husband and I felt a sense of relief. The past was truly behind us, and we were free to move forward without any lingering doubts or regrets. It was like a weight had been lifted, and we could finally breathe again. Our relationship entered a new phase of stability and trust. We continued to nurture our bond, finding joy in the little moments and supporting each other through life's challenges. Cooking dinner together, late-night talks, spontaneous road trips, these were the things that mattered now. We planned a future together, discussing dreams and goals. Our experiences had taught us the importance of communication and honesty. We felt more connected than ever. We dreamed of traveling the world, starting new projects, and maybe even expanding our family. The possibilities seemed endless, and for the first time, I felt truly hopeful. Our journey wasn't without its ups and downs, but we faced each challenge together. We had become a stronger, more resilient couple, capable of weathering any storm. There were moments of frustration and doubt, but they were fleeting, overshadowed by the love and trust we had rebuilt. One evening, we revisited the initial proposal that had set everything in motion. We laughed and reflected on how much we had learned. "Can you believe we actually did that?" I asked, shaking my head. It was a reminder of our journey and the love that had endured. We had taken a risk, faced our fears, and come out stronger on the other side. As time passed, our love deepened. We continued to grow individually and as a couple, always mindful of the lessons we'd learned. Our marriage was a testament to our commitment and resilience. We had faced the ultimate test and emerged victorious. The past was a distant memory, a chapter in our book that we had finally closed. Life had a way of throwing curveballs, but we were ready. Together, we could handle anything. Our love had been tested, stretched, and nearly broken, but it had survived. And that was something worth celebrating every single day. We decided to renew our vows, celebrating our journey and reaffirming our commitment. The ceremony was intimate, with close friends and family. It was a beautiful reminder of our love and the strength we had gained. Standing there, surrounded by the people who mattered most, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. It wasn't just about the words we spoke, it was about the journey we had taken to get here. Every tear, every argument, every late-night talk had led us to this moment. Our renewed vows were a symbol of our new beginning. We felt a sense of closure and accomplishment, knowing we had overcome significant challenges together. The past was a series of lessons learned, each one making us stronger. As we exchanged rings, I couldn't help but feel a swell of pride. We had faced our demons and come out the other side more united than ever. We continued to build a life filled with love and adventure. Our shared experiences had created a deep bond, and we looked forward to the future with optimism and excitement. We traveled to new places, tried new things, and made countless memories. Each adventure was a testament to our resilience and the love that had seen us through the toughest times. Our friends and family noticed the positive change in our relationship. We became a source of inspiration, sharing our story and the lessons we had learned with others facing similar challenges. It was strange at first, being seen as a beacon of hope, but it was also incredibly fulfilling. If our story could help even one couple navigate their own rocky path, it was worth it. We focused on giving back to our community, volunteering together, and supporting causes we cared about. It was a fulfilling way to strengthen our bond and make a positive impact. Whether it was helping out at the local shelter or organizing community events, we found joy in making a difference together. It added another layer to our relationship, a shared purpose that brought us even closer. Our relationship continued to evolve, always growing and adapting. We remained committed to each other, constantly working to keep our love strong and vibrant. It wasn't always easy, but nothing worth having ever is. We learned to communicate better, to listen more, and to never take each other for granted. As the years passed, we faced new challenges, but our love and resilience carried us through. There were health scares, career changes, and the inevitable ups and downs of life. But through it all, we leaned on each other, our bond unbreakable. We had built a solid foundation, and our marriage continued to thrive. Looking back, it was clear that our journey was far from conventional. But then again, who wants a boring love story? Ours was filled with twists and turns, heartache and joy, mistakes and triumphs. And I wouldn't have it any other way. We had found our way back to each other, stronger and more in love than ever. And that was a happy ending worth fighting for. We became mentors to younger couples, sharing our story and offering guidance. Who would have thought we'd be the ones doling out advice? Our experiences had given us valuable insights, and we were eager to help others navigate their own relationships. It was almost surreal seeing these wide-eyed couples looking up to us, hanging on our every word. Trust me, I'd say with a wink, if we can survive our roller coaster, so can you. Our family grew, and we cherished the moments spent with loved ones. The house was always buzzing with laughter, love, and the chaos of new beginnings. Grandkids running through the hallways, holiday dinners that turned into dance parties. It was everything I'd ever wanted. Our home wasn't just a place, it was a living, breathing testament to the life we'd built together. We continued to travel and explore the world together, creating new memories and deepening our bond. Each adventure brought us closer and enriched our lives. Whether it was sipping wine in Tuscany or hiking the trails in Patagonia, every trip was a new chapter in our story. The world was our playground, and we embraced it with open arms and hearts full of wonder. Our relationship became a legacy of love, a testament to our commitment and resilience. We faced each new day with gratitude, knowing we had built something truly special. Each morning felt like a gift, another chance to love and be loved. Our journey had been anything but ordinary, and that was the beauty of it. We celebrated milestones and anniversaries with joy and reflection. Each year was a reminder of how far we had come and the love that had sustained us. We looked through old photo albums, laughing at our younger selves and marveling at the path we'd taken. Every laugh line and gray hair was a badge of honor, a testament to our enduring love. Our story became a cherished memory, a tale of love, growth, and perseverance. We looked back with pride, knowing we had overcome significant challenges and emerged stronger. It wasn't always easy, but nothing worth having ever is. We had built a life that was rich with experience and love, and that was something to be proud of. We embraced the future with hope and excitement, always looking forward to the next chapter in our journey. Our love was a constant source of strength and inspiration. There was no end to the adventures we could have, no limit to the love we could share. We were each other's rock, and that gave us the courage to face whatever came our way. As we grew older, we cherished the simple moments, the quiet evenings, the shared laughter, the comfort of being together. Our love was a beacon of light, guiding us through life's ups and downs. Sitting on the porch, holding hands, watching the sunset, it was in these moments that the true essence of our love shone brightest. We continued to nurture our relationship, always mindful of the lessons we had learned. Our love was a living testament to our journey and the strength of our bond. We knew what it took to keep the flame alive, and we never took each other for granted. Every day was a new opportunity to show love and appreciation. Our legacy of love inspired others, a reminder that true love could overcome any obstacle. We shared our story with pride, knowing we had created something beautiful and enduring. It wasn't just about us, it was about the hope and inspiration we could offer to others. Love, after all, was meant to be shared. In our twilight years, we looked back on our journey with gratitude. Our love had been tested, but it had endured and flourished. We were proud of what we had built together. The challenges we had faced only made our bond stronger, and we were grateful for every moment, good and bad. Our final years were filled with peace and contentment. We had faced many challenges, but our love had always been our guiding light. We cherished every moment together, knowing how precious time was. There was a quiet joy in just being together, in the simple act of loving each other. As we reached the end of our journey, we knew our love would live on in the hearts of those we had touched. Our story was a testament to the power of love, commitment, and resilience. We faced the future with hope, knowing our love had left a lasting legacy. And as we held hands, looking out at the world we had built together, we knew that love truly was the greatest